this is just so the audience knows our 11th season premiere. We're going into our 11th year, which is exciting. We're so glad to start with your film. And just as a special thank you to Bleecker Street, they let us screen the movie in the theater. It was our first screening in 2 years. So all the UCSB students and staff got a chance to see the movie where it belongs, in a movie theater.
How wonderful.
Yeah, it was a great, and
I wish I could be there.
Me too. Well, it was actually good because I missed that part when we can talk, you know, after the movie, patrons talking. That's one of the things missed with the darn pandemic. So Maria, just to let you know, we are monitoring every response that you have to my questions, and our algorithm will program me to make adjustments so you only get questions you like.
Okay, let's see if that works.
So I'm Your Man is based on a short story. What was it about the short story that made you want to expand into a feature film?
Well, actually, I had only heard about the short story. I was talking to my agent, to be perfectly honest now, because my previous feature film was a long journey of a lot of research, and I loved it though. But at the same time, I was in the mood for something which will not possibly take 5 years of my life to develop. It was a lot of research, the one before. So I talked to my agent, and then she said, you know, there's this short story chosen to be made for film, and it's about a robot and a woman, I believe. And I don't know, sometimes, you know, you can hardly explain. I immediately started to have my own fantasy without even having read the short story. I thought that is interesting because a love story and then not a real love story, a man, a woman, not a man, a robot. It maybe, you know, it's just, yeah. And then I read the short story, and the premise, we kept the premise. The premise is that, you know, Tom is a new generation of robots designed, particularly modified for a specific person, for Alma. And so we kept that premise. The short story itself goes some very different way into a more traditional battle between the human and its creation, and ends in destruction and death.
That is how it works. So then what was the biggest challenge for you and your co-screenwriter, Jan Schamberg, in trying to like making that into a bigger story or changing the direction of it? What would you find structurally was your biggest challenge?
Well, I think it was, we always reminded us that it was about that they shouldn't interact like, you know, like humans. It took us a while to understand that it's better for us if this is something really new for mankind and for Alma, that there is no reference, that these kind of robots didn't arrive in society yet. There was no experience. So what's really interesting, and also while directing, I always thought this is the main thing. She cannot predict him as she might be able to predict a human. She doesn't want him. She doesn't like this whole concept, and still she observes him like an eagle. You know, she's like, because she knows all these stories. She has all these stories in herself like we do about, you know, a creature, a machine, all of a sudden trying to start a revolution against her, or maybe being dangerous. So yeah, the super attention of both for each other, that was something which we always tried to seek for.
Yeah, it was interesting because I just going back to, because there's a question later, but I think we'll jump to it now. I love the moment where Tom interacts with the deer and they're not afraid of him. The animals are not afraid of him. So it was a nice choice of not making the robots physically dangerous, because every AI movie always makes the robots dangerous.
Exactly, exactly. That was a very conscious choice, that we thought, what if what if we are all fed with the stories and the fear, but what if an individual like Tom might turn out to bring all the achievements which we might call specifically human, you know, the reason, the empathy, the civilization, you know, the controlling our instincts, controlling our effects. Maybe he turns out to be better at all of that. And it's interesting. It's interesting because Alma is asked to evaluate if he should be, you know, able to carry a passport and to be able to work in our society, or to marry and be responsible. And he turns out to be much more responsible than Alma herself.
Yeah, but it's interesting because, but how can you get married if you don't have, you know, he doesn't have agency to make that kind of choice. So that was nice themes to wrestle it. Exactly. Let's get back to Alma. Is obviously the central character. She's devoted to her research, zero interest in romance, coming from a trauma. How did you go about creating that character who is fundamentally against the human desire of love at this time?
Well, I'm not so sure if I agree with you. I think, you know, she's quite a normal person. I identify with her, and you know, she, on the one hand side, she is lucky enough to have lived through a real, you know, human love story. So she experienced love. She's demanding. She's in the mid of her 40s. She wouldn't be happy with anyone. You know, she loves her work. It's a complex, modern, and then normal woman. Maybe we don't see people like her too much on the screen yet, but I have a lot of friends like that. You know, really dedicated, fulfilled by their work, but not necessarily, and still, you know, with a hope for romance, but definitely not a robot romance, definitely not a substitute for the real thing. She's not that needy to take a machine. Then she rather stays on her own and she doesn't suffer from it, right? So I think, I mean, with all the scripts I've co-written so far, I identified with her, and I think she's a kind of, here and there, she's an alter ego to me.
Oh. But now Tom is interesting because, and crafting his character, because he is obviously totally, you know, based on her. In some ways, is a reflection of her or her secret desires or even subconscious desires. How do you go about creating a character who's based on even a subconscious desire of the other character?
Well, now that we are talking script to screen, I can reveal that we thought about, will we see the tests? Will we see Alma in the labs? Will we see, you know, how machines scan her brain? I mean, a much more general question, do we really create that future world? And then at the very end, and there were some of these scenes. To be honest, we wrote that script very fast. So it was astonishingly fast. It was like, I don't know, 8 weeks in total. And it was, yeah, something felt easy. So then we threw it all away and we thought, no, it's much more interesting to not create a future world like in Her, to have a human being in the center. And the movie is obviously about what it means to be human and not what it means to be a machine, right? So it's a sensation. She meets him and she doesn't know how that works. And she tells her dean then, yeah, they tested me and they scanned and I had multiple choice questions over and over. And we all have our own fantasies. And then Tom, yeah, he's like, he comes straight out of, you know, the factory. So he is still during their first meeting, he's clumsy, you know, and that was great fun to start. And that was very clear from the beginning. We start with a blind date, and the blind date is a mixture of, you know, something which a machine thinks is romance and giving strange compliments. and something Alma thinks should be a test. You know, what she learned how to test a machine, a robot, and asking all these questions. And then he kind of slowly develops and adapts.
Well, let's talk about a little about your cast. We'll start with Alma. What did you see in Maren Eggert that made you feel like she would be the perfect person to play Alma?
She was just so human. I knew her before. She's Berlin-based. I'm Berlin-based. We worked in the same theater. We never, were in a production together, but we were on the same stage. I knew her work, and I asked her into the audition. And from the very first task on, she had this beautiful mixture about comedy and depth. And I think she is so beautiful. And then she looks very normal. She's kind of unpredictable. And also as an actress, she would just throw herself in scenes. She wouldn't come with an exact plan or some kind of a self-developed choreography or something. In the contrary to Dan. And that would be your next question, I believe, right?
Yep, of course.
So I'll jump over your question.
Sure, no, this is exactly what we're talking about, Dan,
So yes, I think Dan's work, if you look at Legion or The Guest, there is such a precision. There are moments I can see in others of his work that I discovered Tom in moments, and then, yes, but I have to say a bit more about Dan. So from the beginning, I thought it might be very interesting to not cast a German actor, to first of all, find someone who is not that immediately recognizable for a German-speaking audience. It's my first German-speaking film. So, and also having someone who is very good in German, because the lines of Tom are very complicated, even for a native speaker. He must be very fast, and it's very high language. So, but still finding an actor who brings some kind of strange foreign aspect into the language. Maybe that's easier then to get into this deal, to buy the deal. Okay, Dan Stevens is a robot, even though we don't open his head and we don't see any kind of, proof that he really is a robot. And yes, we were at the pandemic. We shot during the pandemic. It was very hard to, we met via Zoom like we meet now. And I sent him the script, and I knew he was talking German because he shot in Germany before. And then we just started talking about it. And I couldn't be happier. Oh, and then the last thing, and of course I wanted Tom to be like this, how do you say, ideal, good-looking man. We were always I always thought about a timeless gentleman, something Cary Grant-like. And also I thought about Ken from Barbie. So yeah, I was looking for this very talented, very well-speaking German, very good-looking actor. And it felt like a winner in the lottery.
He has really good comedic timing too, though.
Yes.
He can definitely deliver the jokes, because they're very, they're not the easiest jokes to deliver too. It's very, and he was perfect at some of those lines.
Yes, yeah.
Now, traditionally, films, when they have robots, often sexualize them, and they're usually making them female. Blade Runner, Westworld, Ex Machina, Metropolis. There's a long history of sexualizing female robots.
Yes.
What was the challenges and/or fun of flipping that trope a little and making it the male?
Yeah, that was actually also one of these aspects which were intriguing from the moment I heard about this the short story by Emma Braslavsky that that I immediately thought, oh, interesting, the robot in the love story is the man and not the woman. Yes. And I mean, it is very interesting because I totally feel like Alma. I have no interest. I have no sexual, I can't find sexual attraction in treating another individual as an object. For instance, right? I'm again and again surprised when people say, "What's Alma's problem?" You know, a lot of men, you know, say, "What is her problem? Why is she hesitating so much?" And then we also have the scene very late in the movie where we see Dr. Stuber with the female a robot. I like that scene very much because it kind of surprises you. At first you think, yes, of course, the 60-year-old with this attractive, one beautiful. Then he is very honest, and Alma understands, okay, there are a lot of people who never experienced love. And of course, it's about loneliness. The whole film is also about loneliness. And then who could blame anyone to rather have, someone like Tom in the house than no one? But this guy, for instance, makes very clear that for him, the fact that she is a servant, a machine, an object, it's not such a big problem. Like for Alma, he's already negotiating, how much money he would have to pay to keep her for good. So all of this is so foreign to Alma, and this is of course has to do with gender, with the roles, and that rather the women have been objectified during centuries. And it's fun to add some different images to this, and I felt it very clearly. For instance, when we shot the scene on where Alma asks, "Oh, so let down your trousers. Let me see what's made for me," right? And then he does it, and I felt in the team around me and all these people, it was kind of still a bit sensational that he would just let down his trousers, obedient to her demand.
Yeah, it was interesting. And we'll jump that scene just for now and we'll go back to the beginning. But I mean, she throws wine in his face. She makes him display on, anger on command, nudity. He has no sexual agency. Like, he has no rights in this situation. It was obviously uncomfortable for the audience. How did you approach that scene, especially directing? Because it's kind of touching on a lot of difficult thematic things.
Are you talking now about the scene I was just talking
Yes,
about?
exactly. Yeah, that was one. Yeah, that whole scene. They don't have sex yet. We talk about that later, but that scene where she's basically forcing him to have sex, fundamentally. Was that a difficult scene to shoot, or were you like very conscious of how we're going to do this because it's very sensitive?
Well, I had the luxury to be able to sit with both of the actors for, let's say, I think 10 days prior to shooting. And we talked through everything, and we read the lines, and we talked about how we see it. Alma's apartment was a stage built. The office was just above it, so we could go down, even if the apartment wasn't finished yet. We could start to rehearse a bit. I could tell them, see, this is how I see it, with a big distance between you both. And with all my project, I thought that's really helpful to have some time and talk to the actors before, and then shooting it. It was basically fun, and I can't repeat enough that I'm very grateful for Dan, who immediately understood these scenes. There are, within very good-looking male actors, you encounter this permanent will of being, the good guy, not, you know, to be in the good light, to be not, you know, I know so many actors who wouldn't really like doing this, what he did. And he had, I mean, he was an ally to me. It was fun.
All right, so let's go back. We're going to talk a little about the opening scene. The film has an amazing look. I mean, I love the romantic lighting of your blind date scene, which you mentioned. How did you approach that scene, the overall look with your cinematographer? What kind of look do you want for the film?
So after the decision that we won't create a future world, we said it's still interesting to find locations which haven't been seen in movies so far. And then, so the Pergamon, there wasn't a feature film yet, which was allowed into the Pergamon. The university where she works, it's a very new building in Berlin. It's the Museum of the Future. They allowed us to install the university there. So what I liked is Berlin is, you know, there are so many architectural collisions in the city, and also Alma's apartment is a very typical Berlin apartment built after the war. So, and then also the ballroom is something very typical Berlin. So I like this idea of having recognizable, very decisive and very different locations. And approaching them with not how do we say, I'm sorry, my English, how do you, with some modesty, to not, you know, I wanted it to be classical a bit, you know, in the setups, in the sizes. I didn't want the camera to become crazy. I wanted to be a bit timeless and have all these really beautiful locations be powerful by themselves without a lot of additional dances with camera and lights.
I like I love the scene where like we see Alma's point of view of Dan dancing the rumba. It's one of my favorite shots. Where
Yes.
you know, because almost like, but I also like, but it was interesting later when you had that great moment where the only time Alma was interested in dancing was when she was testing the limits of the holograms.
Yes.
Like, there was such a fluid moment when she's putting her hands through. I love that. Was like, oh, the scientist's mind was really getting excited on that one. There was some really great shots with that. Okay, so what's I've been in many awkward car rides in my life, but watching Tom and Alma in that car ride home, I really wanted to get out of the back seat. It was so uncomfortable. I mean, Tom mansplaining and kind of like doing all these, telling me the thing. It was brilliant and funny. But so what was your conversation, the three of you, to make that scene work so well?
To be very honest, learn your lines and do it fast. I think specifically in German, it's one of the most complicated scenes for Dan, and he was very nervous because these sentences are so complicated. And so we had a dialogue coach, and he just worked very hard. And I thought it works best if, you know, Alma is kind of poker face, and he's trying to be, you know, to connect. He's trying to have a conversation. And so yeah, it was basically speak as fast as you can, as late, you know, effortless and fast.
I just the visual moment when Alma just drops down the seat was perfect.
Yeah.
That was she didn't need to say anything. It was just her reaction. I did also like when he gets home. I mean, she's a fiercely independent woman, but he's tidying up her house for her, cooking for her. It was a nice little flip of kind of the situation, especially flipping the common gender roles on that one. Was that something conscious you were thinking of? You want to kind of play with that, having Tom do all those things?
Um, he is designed to make her happy, and whatever it might take, I mean, I specifically love the idea that the robot puts the books in order to colors, and that he destroys the chaotic order of Alma's things. It's a nightmare basically, and it's funny, and yeah.
But getting back to the human relationships, I mean, there's so much great tension between Julian and Alma in their scenes, especially early on. How did you want to kind of like compare their relationship to Tom and Alma's relationship?
um Yes, it's interesting. Julian, I have to say, I'm so happy to have that particular actor to play him, because I forgive Julian these. I mean, I mean, he's a liar, he's a coward, he he's clumsy, he doesn't think much. I mean, he asks question, and at the same time he wants to talk about himself. I mean, like we are, it's very, we're all so self-centered that the moment we start a conversation, we actually want to talk about ourselves. And Tom is he actually want to know who Alma is and how he can, achieve what he's made for. I mean, this interesting mixture of masculinity and naivety, like almost like a newborn, almost like the absolute absence of sarcasm, of aggression, of egotistic self-centeredness. This is something very unseen, I think, and disturbing also. And Julian, I mean, what can I say? He's a good-looking guy, and he just doesn't dare to tell the truth, and he's very human, half true in everything what he says, and still charming.
I did like though the first time she kind of, for me, had any romantic interest in Tom was when she was looking down at Julian and Tom together, like when they're putting the painting in the car. There's a moment where she's from the balcony looking at Tom.
Yes,
It was a
I
nice
think
little
it even
contrast.
starts earlier. I think it starts earlier that Tom impresses Julian so much.
Right, yeah.
That is something she enjoys.
Yeah, so the ex-boyfriend's approving of the robot. Ooh, interesting. But one of the themes what I really liked was the fact that Tom is kind of like a mirror to her soul. Like when he finds out about the research and calls her tears egotistical. Did you always want to have Tom as a mirror, kind of like being able to look straight into Alma directly and you see who she is?
I think as much as he wants to please Alma, he also wants to understand humankind, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that is also something very difficult for us to imagine, that there might be an individual who thinks it doesn't matter if you are rewarded for it, as long as it's in the world as a revelation or as a scientific work, right? Who cares? So that is also very unknown to us, right? We all think about us, our careers, our achievements, and that's, yes, we care mostly about our own needs. And Tom obviously does not. That is something disturbing. And sometimes, maybe one day there are these other species and they look down at us, and as we look down on animals. And the only remaining things for us are our instincts, our, idiotic human imperfections. It's also a bit intimidating.
Well, and I was also interested. I love the scene previously where he was watching the videos of people, those
Yes,
home
epic
videos.
fail.
Yeah, and that was like it was actually fascinating because even I was trying to look at it from Robo's point of view. It's like, oh my God, this seems silly. If anybody actually saw this, what kind of people are we that we enjoy this?
Yes, yes. Yes, and at the same time, I mean, Jan and I, the co-writer, and I, we kind of started to be more generous with our own kind again. And because yes, we are very imperfect.
But it's interesting because we talked about Tom being the mirror to Alma's soul. She demands that he have sex with her, but he knows that she doesn't really want that and rejects her. I was really taken by that moment when Dan actually walks away when she's drunk.
Yeah, I think she does want it. She does, that night means, okay, now show me what you've got. And now I'm trying you out, right? This is what I'm asked for. Now let's see what you can do. I think Tom understands by then that she will not talk to him any longer the next morning if he would sleep with her at that moment. She would hate herself. She would hate him even more. Maybe that's what the algorithm understands, that she is seeking for, an individual with a free will. He has to perform the free will because this is what she wants from love. She doesn't want a relationship you can buy. She doesn't want someone you can program to do certain things. So he has to pretend to be unpredictable. The algorithm is learning, right? And now we are coming back to what's a woman and what's a man. So she has a big problem with a man. She cannot fall in love with someone you can program.
But she kind of begins to, which is interesting.
Oh yeah, of course. Because she forgets. She wants to forget it. Yeah,
and we all. And I was wondering this when Alma discovers that the caseworker is a robot, which is actually one of my favorite twists because she's such a brilliant scientist. She should never be fooled. I thought it was such a great moment when she actually got tricked.
Yes. Yes. Yes, at the end, I think her reason and her emotion, they kind of part, right? While she dictates these lines for the evaluation, she does the opposite. Yes. And that was an interesting thing for the whole. It was an interesting thing for the whole movie, and for the scenes, how to approach the scenes, because it's, yes, part of it is a romantic comedy, and with two actors like Maren and Dan, at first we think it's impossible. That's the setup for the romantic comedy, right? No way, it will not happen. And then, we start developing also feelings for Dan, for Tom, and actually we want them to get together, right? So the question always was, do we want the audience to just forget that? Do we want to make it easy for the audience? Just forget that he's a machine and he's getting better and better, and then you cannot, then he's just like a regular human? Or isn't it more interesting to have the machine being visible and the most awkward, to be always reminded he's not a human? And still, and also Alma is always reminded he's not a human, and still she starts falling in love with him and getting into trouble and a conflict with herself.
Yeah, I mean, there's a great moment where she brings him home to the family to meet dad and the sister and the nephew, and they build the story of the childhood, the meadow scene. That was our, the romance thing, but it really seemed to have to be earned though, because if she went too early to that, it probably wouldn't have worked.
Exactly. I mean, he gives her the promise that they just go through the 3 weeks and leave each other alone, right? She doesn't want anything from him. He shouldn't bother. And then there is the Julian scene where, as we said, she's really impressed. Yeah, and then she takes him to her family. And I think the moment he agrees to let the whole love thing out of the game, she kind of relaxes, right? And then they have this walk, and then they really start to invent a mutual, story, how they met and everything. And then, yeah, without realizing, she falls in love.
Yeah, that was that was, and again, very interesting for the character of Tom. Kind of knows all this because he's programmed to understand her and gets to know her more. Um, I was struck by the balance of comedy and sometimes real tragedy and trauma. I mean, the housewarming scene. I mean, Tom catches a fainting girlfriend, funny, and then the great robotic dialogue. But then we all go to we discover, the loss of the child, Alma, and takes in a sequence. How did you approach that sequence? Because you're starting with the comedy, but then going very dramatically almost in the same beats, or quickly.
Yes, I think we both are in love with some kind of unpredictability. I actually like when people say we both, I mean, my co-writer Jan Schambach and I, and of course, the father already, the father is already, I mean, he symbolizes, no, he doesn't symbolize, but he's so human. He's old. He's going to die. Of course, what's the difference between us? Where is the gap? Would you ever feel loss? Is there loss if you don't live and you don't die? Is there sadness? Is there, everything? We share this with every other human. You and I, we share the experience that you can miss moments in your life and they will not come back, And is there comfort from a machine who doesn't know what we're talking about? So yes, of course, and it is. I mean, it's a theme for it's still a big theme for a modern woman in our time, and a working woman. It's a question about family. It's about, when do you do this, and will you find the moment, will you find the partner, the loss, the melancholy about it. It's yeah, it was pretty clear from the beginning that it should be not only a comedy, that it should be, yeah, I mean, it should be a tale about love and loneliness and longing and loss and all of that. That's what I love about, the simplicity of the setup. This is what we felt right in the beginning with, the combination of Tom, the encounter of Tom and Alma asks some fundamental questions which we cannot answer yet. We don't have an answer ready for this.
Yeah, I guess I gotta just say that the scene was so heartbreaking when they play the game of warmer and colder to discover the ultrasound. That was actually one of the most moving scenes to me.
Thank you.
But and also so the portrayal of the sex scene was unique in many ways because Tom focuses. I like talking about the orgasm and how it appeals to their scientific mind. But how did you approach that sex scene with your actors to try to keep it within that supports their characters and their own narrative journey?
So yes, when it comes to sex scenes, it's always an embarrassing and it's, you know, a passion in movies. It's difficult, bad scenes. And then, having the concept of Tom, who is better in basically everything. He rescues the lady at the birthday party or at the housewarming party. He speaks every language. And then what? He's also the better lover than any other human. And where does this lead to? What exactly am I supposed to do then? It's well, to be honest, I think what's the most interesting thing about that scene is Alma trying to step in her head over this obstacle, over her knowledge that she's not sleeping with a human, to allow herself to allow herself, her body, her desire to, what does it take to forget this, And so I thought that's maybe the most interesting thing, to stay on Alma's face and this inner battle. Do I get there? Can I get there into the forgetting all of it or just ignoring it? I think that's the theme of the scene.
And it also leads to the brilliant next scene where she's putting covers over him, tiptoeing around not to wake him up. So almost like, again, she's trying to forget that he's a robot, but then knows that she needs to end the relationship, but still can't end the relationship on her own. So there's a lot going on there. Like she asked him to break it off, really, to walk away.
Yes.
So for you, so it's almost like, would you say that maybe it's a situation where there's an addiction going on here, where she can't, like, she knows she should stop, but she needs him to break it off?
The addiction we all call falling in love, right? Against better knowledge. We've all been there. And I like that too. You have to help me. You have to help me now. You have to go. Take the key with you. No, I mean, it's irrational. It's all irrational. At the end, it is rational. And then he becomes very irrational. This was Jan's idea. This moment, this image that he's at the glass container down and he puts his head at the glass container. It just doesn't make sense at all. It doesn't make sense at all. It doesn't make sense that he plays with the deers, but it doesn't make sense that he puts his, as if he could hear something in that container, something poetic, unexplained. It's nice. It's irrational. Both become irrational.
That was very well. And of course, we go to the end where Tom knows she's going to go to the childhood vacation home. So I love the scene where she's on the ping pong table telling that she wished, the boyhood Tom kissed her. Was that always the ending you intended? Kind of semi-open because you cut the black before we see the kiss, theoretically.
Well, that was structurally, yes. So we were very happy with this idea that the woman from the factory tells them when he picks him up, right? That it's to invent a story. And then there are these structural waves that she says, don't get close to me. The moment he agrees, just, let's have a friendship without any pressure, she relaxes. Then and then inventing Denmark, Denmark, which is, it's very typical for from northern Germany, families. I used to go with my parents to Denmark. A lot of people would go to Denmark, and then inventing that. And yes, from that moment on, it was clear. The moment they came up with this idea that her childhood friend, she fell in love with her first love basically as a child, that he is maybe him. And yes, then it was clear that it has to lead there.
That was a great moment. It was okay. So we're going to have some audience questions, and one of my producers who works with me, Audrey, is going to pop on the screen and has been gathering some audience questions for you.
Okay.
Hey, Audrey.
Hi. Hello.
Hi, Audrey.
So we have some questions from the audience. The first one is from Hannah. Hannah asks if you can speak a little bit about the issue of memory throughout the film. Alma's father is in the process of losing his memory through dementia, while Alma's relationship with Tom depends on constructing new yet artificial memories of their past. How did you envision the relationship between humanness and memory when creating this film?
Well, we spoke a lot about it. That's a very interesting question. And I don't know if this is still in your world or in the university world the same. I have a lot of people around me, for instance, who are a bit uncomfortable admitting that they met their partner in the internet or in the dating way. So I just a couple of months ago, I talked to a friend and he said, oh, you have such a great story how you met your partner. I think we have to invent a story too. I think it is very human to create let's say sometimes I see it like the map and the roads and streets of a city. All your memories, and then you just love this one story about you. You love the story about your childhood. You love the story about your relationship, and it becomes a highway because it's going to be a very big road because you go it all the way. All the time, again and again, and you keep repeating specific experiences, and you favor some memories over other memories, and this is how you also create your own personality and your view onto yourself. I think we are all how we present ourselves by the choice of what we talk, what we tell others about memories. We create a persona, I think, very different to the machine who just sees it all, doesn't forget, and not necessarily favors.
Thank you. The next question is that Katharina asked about Alma's position as a researcher in Sumerian cuneiform writing. How did you decide to make that Alma's profession?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that took us a while because, as I said before, we decided it must be a new creation. How do they meet? Why? Alma doesn't want this, but then how do they meet? So there was the decision, it's a new prototype and it has to be tested. So there is this ethic commission, which we have in Germany, that Angela Merkel asked scientists and all these people, to debate. So then we said, okay, so she should be in science. And she must be forced to go into this test. By whom? Well, by her boss, by a dean. So let's say anthropology. So the dean is asked into this commission. So she, loosely works in anthropology. And then we thought, what could it be? And then, of course, it's, she is the human from present times. Tom is the machine from the future. And what if she is busy with, the beginning of human civilization, with the first, and also what's kind of cinematic? What would be, would she be what's the word for it? If you dig for things, we thought about that, and then we came up with cuneiforms. That's the word, right? In English.
Yeah, it's
The
the same.
first writing. Yes. And this is actually how I convinced the people from the Pergamon Museum, also because it's just beautiful. I said, imagine, here's Alma from our days, and then there's the future, Tom, and then they have the first kiss under the roof of the antique 3,000-year-old Millet portal, and that's how they allowed us that the both actors go into this building on the wall. So yeah, it's yes. This is how we developed this idea that she looks for poetry in the first writing of mankind. This is really fun. I mean, I'm happy to answer more questions.
Yeah, we do have one last question. As we are an academic institution, we would like you to be professor for a moment. And if you were to assign us one movie for students to watch to study screenwriting, which movie would it be?
Oh my God. So just to tell you, I didn't even graduate from regular school. I didn't finish my acting school. I've never seen a film school from inside. So I learned everything by doing it. Have you ever heard of a filmmaker, a theater director, Ariane King? She did an outrageous movie on Molière. It's called Molière. This is basically the movie which inspired me to, become an actress. And it's a collision of theater and movie, and it's a movie which would not be made again in our days. It's outrageous in every sense.
Well, thanks so much for coming. And this has been we really love watching the film and the theater, but also again to talk to you about it. Of course, in the future, we'd love you to come to Santa Barbara and showcase whatever film you want to show of yours when, it's safe.
Thank you very much. That's a wonderful invitation. I have to say, I haven't seen I'm Your Man in a movie theater. I've seen it once in public on a screen. That was the Berlin Festival open air, but I haven't been inside a movie theater so far. And I haven't been in Santa Barbara. So thank you for the invitation.
Oh yeah, anytime. We'd love to. So thanks so much. And thank you for the audience for joining us today.
It was a great pleasure. Thank you for all these questions and your interest. Bye-bye. All the best.
Yeah.
Bye.